Hello, so in this video I'm going to talk you through the process of resolving leading tone 7th chords. And to do this we're going to follow 3 steps. The first is going to be to resolve the 7th of the chord down by step. The next is going to be to find the tritone within the chord and resolve that properly. And finally, the last step is to resolve the last note of the chord based on the inversion of the tonic triad, which is going to tell us which note to double, and or the need to avoid parallel fifths or octaves. So this last step is also a chance to review your work and make sure we're not running into any other types of issues with the voice leading. Okay, so in this case we're in the key of F major, right? And our leading tone 7th chord here, leading tone in F major is E. So E is the root of our chord, and we have E, G, B flat, D, right? So the 5th of the chord is in the bass here, this B flat, which means the chord is in second inversion. So for our analysis down here, we would write 7 half diminished 4/3. Remember, in major keys, leading tone 7th chord is always going to be half diminished. Okay, and then so we know we're going to be resolving this to the tonic triad, which in this case is FAC. Okay, so let's get started. Our first step, like I said, is going to be to resolve the 7th of the chord down by step. So in this case, the 7th of the chord here is D, right? D natural. So I'm going to resolve that down by step to C here. Okay? Next step is going to be to find the tritone within the chord and resolve that properly, right? And in this case, the tritone here is between B flat and E natural. Okay, so it's spelled as an augmented fourth, which means it's going to resolve outward. So I'm going to, this B flat in the bass is going to go down by a step, and the E in the alto is going to go up to an F. Okay? So lastly, my last step is going to be to resolve this last note based on the inversion of the tonic triad and the need to avoid parallel fifths and octaves. Okay? So right here we have G in the soprano, and our tonic triad is in first inversion here, right? We have FAC and A, the third of the chord, is in the bass, so we have a first inversion tonic triad. 1/6 is what we would write down here for our analysis, okay? So because the tonic triad is in first inversion, you'll remember we can pretty much double any note in a first inversion triad. This means we could move this G either up to an A and double the third of the chord, or move down to an F and double the root of the chord. Before I do this, I'm going to want to double check for any potential parallel fifths or octaves, like I said, right? So let me do that real quick. E to G is a third, D to G is a fourth, and B flat to G is a sixth. So in this case, I don't have to worry about parallel fifths or octaves. So like I said, I have the option of going either way with this soprano voice. So I'm just going to choose to go ahead and go down to the F there. Okay? So moving on, we have the same leading tone 7th chord here. In our next example, we have E, G, B flat, D, right? Root, third, fifth, and 7th. So the first step is going to be to resolve the 7th down by step, just like in the last example. So in this case, the 7th is in the bass. So I'm going to go ahead and resolve this down to a C. Okay. The next step is going to be to find the tritone within the chord and resolve that. So I have the tritone in this case is going to be between the E and the B natural here. So if I go ahead and resolve that, going to go ahead and move the alto voice here up to an F. This is spelled as a diminished fifth here, which means it's going to resolve inwards. That means this is going to go up to an F, and it's being a little funky, hang on. And this will go down to an A. Okay, not sure why the ledger lines aren't showing up. This would be an F here. Okay, now I'm going to resolve the last note based on the inversion of the tonic triad and the need to avoid parallel fifths. So here we go. Our tonic triad, FAC, C is in the bass, which means it's in second inversion. Therefore, I have to double the fifth of the chord. FAC, I'm going to have to double this C. Now that would mean I would have to have this soprano voice jump all the way down to C here, which, as we talked about in class, is probably not the best thing to do. We're going to want to avoid that. So instead, we're going to have to make an exception to some of our rules here. So instead of resolving this tritone here properly, I'm going to go ahead and write parallel, or rather unequal fifths. You'll remember we talked about that in class as well. So now I'm going to move this up to a C, which means I have unequal fifths here between the tenor and the alto, right? E to B flat is a diminished fifth, leading to a perfect fifth, and that means I can then I can move the soprano up to an A, and then now I have smooth, stepwise motion all the voices, and I have the proper doublings. Okay, so the exception we made was to write unequal fifths here between the tenor and the alto. Don't be confused, this is an F here in the tenor. I'm not sure why the ledger lines aren't showing up. All right, so the next example, we have our leading tone seventh chord here is in root position, right? E, G, B flat, D. So we would write 7 half diminished 7 for our analysis, and we'd go about resolving it. Okay, so the first step is going to be to resolve the seventh down by step, right? In this case, it's in the soprano, so this D is going to go down to a C. The next step is going to be to resolve the tritone properly, right? In this case, the tritone is between the between the root here, E and B flat, so it's going to resolve inward since it's spelled as a diminished fifth. The E is going to go up to an F, and the B flat is going to go down to an A. All right. Now the last step here is going to be to resolve the last note of the chord based on the inversion of the tonic triad and the need to avoid parallel fifths. So let's take a look here. The tonic triad is in root position, FAC, so normally we would double the root, right? But like I said, we're going to need to check for parallel fifths. Now in this case, we have a perfect fifth between G here and D. So if we were going to resolve this properly and double the root of the tonic triad, it would look something like this. We would write an F here. However, now we have parallel fifths. G to D is a fifth and F to C is a fifth. So now we're again going to need to make an exception. All right. So to avoid the parallel fifths, we're going to simply double the third of the tonic triad and move this alto voice up to an A. All right. In the last example here, the leading tone seventh chord is right here, E, G, B, D. So the third of the chord, G, is in the bass, which means it's in first inversion. For our analysis, we would write 7 half diminished 6/5 here, and then we'll go about resolving it. So the first step, as always, is going to be to resolve the 7th of the chord down by step. In this case, we have the 7th here in the soprano. This D is going to go down to a C. Next step is going to be to find the tritone and resolve it properly. In this case, it is between B flat and E natural, spelled as a augmented fourth, so it's going to resolve outwards. This E is going to move up to an F, and this B flat is going to move down to an A. Okay? Last step, we're going to resolve that G in the bass. Now, we don't have the inversion of the tonic triad yet, since we're dealing with the bass. So we would seem to have a choice between moving this G to an F here and having a root position tonic triad, or moving the G to an A and having a first inversion tonic triad. So before we make that choice, let's check for parallel fifths and octaves, right? So we're checking this against the other notes of the chord. G to B is a third, G to E is a sixth, and G to D is a fifth. Okay, so now we have to be careful. If we go down to an F here, like so, okay, if we go down to an F, then we're going to have parallel fifths between the bass and the soprano here. So that makes the choice pretty easy. Now we know we're going to have to go up to an A, and which means our tonic triad will be in first inversion. Okay, so I'm going to send you a sheet with similar examples in a different key, but hopefully this gives you a better sense of how to go about resolving these chords. All right, good luck, and I'll see you next week.